Hey guys, this is a Honda HR214 SX lawnmower. This has been an incredibly unbreakable machine for 35 to 40 years. But finally, the self-propelling is barely working, and I'm gonna show you how I was able to fix it. In the past few years, the self-propelling started to not work in second gear sporadically, and then recently it stopped working in first gear as well. When I lift the rear wheel off the ground, the tires do rotate as if self-propelling is working, but it's too weak to propel the mower forward. In my case, it appears that there were compounding problems that contributed to self-propelling gradually deteriorating to a failure. First, the plastic wheel hubs on both rear tires are broken, and that made the hub slip out of the rotating ratchet. Second, the gear shift cable stretched over time and it wasn't able to push the arm to shift into second gear. Third, the transmission oil was never serviced in 40 years and it has become very dirty and lost proper lubrication capability, which is why self-propelling started to show signs of failure in cold temperatures first for many years before failing in warm temperatures as well. Servicing transmission is bit involved work, so make sure that you don't have lots of free play in your rear wheels and that gear shift cable has not stretched. During this project, you'll need to tilt the lawnmower on both sides, so to avoid any spills, you should remove any remaining oil and gas. In my case, the gas tank was near empty, so I just removed the oil. So consider this to be a good time to do an oil change. Also note that in Honda's service manual, they usually suggest that you unplug the spark plug cable to avoid any accidental engine start during the service. I forgot to do it, but you should simply just unplug the spark plug cable. To remove two rear wheels, I like to prop up the deck body on a 4x4 block of wood so that wheels are lifted off the floor. Next, remove two rear wheels using 14mm socket. Note that this outer bolt may not come off easily, and the transmission shaft will likely rotate during the process. Therefore, you'll need to use a vice grip plier to clamp down on the shaft, and it's best if you use a impact wrench if you have one. It's best to use a 6-point socket versus 12-point to reduce the chance of stripping the bolt head, and you can also spray some penetrating oil and let it penetrate for a few minutes to help loosen the bolt. Once you remove the wheels, keep good track of sequence and direction of all the parts per wheel because the ratchet only works in one way and you don't want to mix up the left and right ones. Also, the bracket that fits inside the wheel hub and mates with the ratchet must be inserted into the wheel hub as shown in the picture and not the other way around. So just put the end bolt back on to keep both left and right parts intact in respective wheels. To access the joint area, you have to first remove the 8mm bolt and then use a screwdriver to pry out the top section. So this was a bit tricky. So I used a plier like this, okay, and squeezed on the clamp, and there's no way to remove it, right? So I just moved it to that side on the edge just to expose that pin below. Also move the bottom side of the clamp out of the way so that pin can be pushed out. I tried to push the pin through, but it was kind of stuck. So I sprayed some penetrating oil and waited a minute, and then I was able to lightly tap on it with a hammer and a nail to push it downward. At this point, the pin almost came out, but ran out of a little bit of space with the deck. So I was able to move the joint up slightly and used a plier to pull out the pin. Afterwards, the joint just came out easily and pulled away from the transmission. Here's the pin. By the way, as I was doing this project, I was a bit concerned as to what if I break or lose one of these small parts. So I did some Googling and found online parts store that still carry not all, but some of the HR214 Mower parts. I'll add the link to the description section below the video. Also, I was able to find the shop manual as well, so I'll add this link as well if I can find where it was. Now to detach the transmission from the deck body, we have to remove the 14mm bolt that's holding the adjuster arm to the body. You'll also have to hold a 12mm nut inside to loosen this. Also note that there's a small washer inside when you install this back later. Remove the same bolt on the opposite side and be aware that the transmission will drop at this point, and the only thing that's holding it up will be just cables. Note that there is some thick grease where the adjuster arm was bolted to, so be careful not to wipe that off. Now carefully tilt the mower to its right side. At this point, you might want to take some pictures or videos so that you can see how cables are routed and connected. Also, before you open the transmission case, use a small brush to clean the outer surface so that we don't accidentally drop all that dirt into the transmission casing when we open it apart. I tried to remove the whole adjuster arm bracket on one end to be able to clean the inside of transmission gears more easily, but I couldn't figure out how this thing comes apart, so I gave up. If you figure it out, please leave me a comment on how you did it. Right now, the gear shift and self-propel handle cables are what's keeping the transmission from being detached completely from the body. By the way, if you disconnect these two cables from the handlebar, then you can pull out the transmission, which will give you a little bit more access room to work with. I chose to detach both cables from the transmission side, so that's what my video will show here. This method is more involved, but makes working with transmission a bit more easier, as you don't have two long cables dangling from the transmission cover. Also, this gives you an opportunity to adjust the cable settings, as likely over 35 to 40 years, the cable probably stretched a bit and cables are no longer tightly set like it was in factory setting. That bracket that I just removed a small bolt from didn't want to come out easily because both connecting parts have gear tooth-like markings inside, and that's biting into each other. So I had to use some penetrating oil and hammer it to get it out. Get those teeth marks. They have to be aligned perfectly to come out.
Okay, this one's gonna be the same deal. So I'm gonna completely remove this bolt and a nut here so that I can pry this out. Okay, so same deal. It's a 5/16 nuts and bolts, and I completely took it out from there.
This one gave me less trouble and I was able to pry it out quite easily. This one has a spring, so you'll have to squeeze the spring before you can detach the cable.
So this is the mess we have, and here is the transmission taken out. I just cleaned, you can see all the debris there. I just cleaned outer surface as much as I can before I loosen these 5 bolts so the all that dirt buildup doesn't go inside the gearbox. So I have to keep this up standing straight so I can pour oil. I don't have a vise. I actually have a vise, but I don't have a good table to mount to. So anyway, I just took a bucket, put a couple of heavy rocks inside, and use the wood to kind of stabilize it.
Now remove 5 bolts off the top cover of transmission. I believe those were 8mm bolts. After that, use a flathead screwdriver to pry open the top cover. But keep the shaft vertically positioned so that you minimize any oil spillage.
So the problem is, I don't know how to get this removed. So I can't get this part. That's the part that had this. That safety guard metal broke. So I took it out because this is in a fixed position. I'll break this so I can open this up a little bit higher.
Okay, so I brute force broke that plastic bushing, and now I'm able to lift up on the transmission top cover by several inches and can see the inside much better.
All the gears look good. Actually, they're very shiny. Well, even if something is wrong, it's gonna be difficult for me to fix. So I'm just gonna drain this and clean it a little bit and then refill it. This came out. I don't know where it came out from. We'll figure it out. Also, this gear came out also. Okay, put that back in. Okay, I think I think I know where this came from. Okay, the washer is from up there. Okay, the washer came out of here when I had it upside down. I'm gonna be careful. I don't know how to assemble this back together. Oh, things are coming apart, so I'm gonna be careful not to mess with this too much. There's a lot of residue in there. There's a lot of probably metal debris. I'm gonna clean this before I fill it with oil. I almost want to pour cleaning solution in there and clean it out, but at the same time, I'm very worried that if things just come apart, I don't know that I know how to put this back together. So I'm gonna clean as much as I can, like this. I mean, the gears look great. I mean, I don't see anything broken. You know, look. Oh, uh-oh. This is what I was afraid of. If these things come apart, I wouldn't know how to put that back together. Well, I think before it was here. Does that make sense? Maybe, but it doesn't go through. Uh-oh. Okay, maybe that's what's gonna, oh, okay, it's gonna come through that hole. Okay. Okay, so when you do this, make sure your gears are lined up, and then this thing here, that rod is gonna line up to come out here. So I got the transmission lifted up as high as it'll go, and then I got this from Walmart, SAE AW 80W90. This is the gear lubricant. I'm trying to do this with one hand since I'm holding the transmission. Okay, let me make sure everything is lined up. Try to keep this straight.
Oh well.
All right, so
Quickly hand tighten 5 transmission case bolts to prevent any oil leak. I didn't find the torque spec for these bolts, so be sure to tighten them since they're not easily accessible once you install it. I suppose you could consider using a little bit of thread lock if you want to keep these bolts to not come loose for the next 30 years again. Haha. By the way, at first I didn't notice it, but some bolts are slightly longer, so I had to remove all bolts again and install them to the right spots. Therefore, it's best to keep track of which bolt came out of which spot at the time of the removal. The reinstallation is mostly reversal of uninstallation, so in interest of saving your time and my time, I'm going to only cover the important steps that you need to know. To reinstall the gear shift cable, it's important to follow the following. First, make sure the push arm is sitting on top of the shift slider rod like this. Second, the gear shift must be in first gear or slow speed setting. Third, make sure to tighten the cable to remove any slacks. If all of this is not done properly, when you shift into fast second gear, the push arm won't be able to push down on the shift slider rod to cause the transmission to engage in second gear. The only tricky thing about installing the throttle cable is you have to compress the spring to be able to install it.
squeeze the spring while pulling this out and putting it in there. You see? Okay. Actually, that wasn't as bad.
Cables can become slightly stretched over 35 plus years of use, so check for slack and tighten them as necessary. Adjuster arm installation is pretty straightforward. Just don't forget the small washer that goes inside first. Next, connect the joint to the transmission by inserting back in the pin that you removed, and don't forget to put the spring clamp over it so that the pin doesn't pop out. Because my rear wheel hubs are cracked, it creates too much slack and sometimes it can't self-propel. Therefore, I went to Lowe's and bought these washers to remove slack, and that made the wheel less wobbly and more stable.
This one, when you measure the oil, you don't screw in, okay? You just set it like that and then pull it out to measure.
This engine takes about 0.66 quart of oil, and you can use any of the following oil: 10W30, 10W40, 20W40, 20W50, depending on average temperature of your area. Lastly, let's put the joint cover back on and the spark plug cable, and we are ready for a test. Look at that. Now both gears work, and lawnmower propels near effortlessly with no hands pushing it. Hooray! But let's give it a real hard test to my backyard 6 to 8 inches long tall grass that I haven't been able to cut due to the self-propelling not working. With the self-propelling working again, it's now able to plow right through the 6 to 8 inches tall grass. I hope that was helpful, and I'll see you guys soon with more Honda lawnmower repair videos.